I know, this video is coming a little bit later, given that it's already a few days into the new year, but let me talk about my favorite reads of 2023. In 2023, I read 50 books and altogether around 20,600 pages, which is crazy because my goal was 20 books per year on Storygraph. That being said, I quit my full-time job back in March to search for a new position, so naturally I had a lot more free time to read than previously. I've had some reading slumps and powered through some books that now, looking back, I should have DNF'd, but overall I'm quite happy with my reading year. In the previous video I already talked about all the books I did not finish reading, so to balance it out, here are the top 5 books that were the absolute highlights of my reading in 2023. I know it's a little bit of cheating that I put an entire series here, but I read all of the books in 2023, and the Once Upon a Broken Heart series quickly became my Roman Empire, if you will. Throughout the series, we follow Evangeline in this dark, fairy tale-esque world as she makes a bargain with Jax, the Prince of Hearts, to prevent her lover from marrying her sister, I know, and finds herself in the middle of the consequences of this bargain. There are so many things I love about these books. The pacing is done masterfully, slower when it needs to be, and faster when the plot requires it. The world building is absolutely enchanting, with some of the lore about the Fates already being present in Stephanie Garber's other series, Caraval, but you don't need to read that in order to understand what's going on here. I haven't read that either. Evangeline is not the strongest or the smartest female main character you will ever read, but she stays true to her belief and to chasing her true love despite all the obstacles. And now, let's talk about Jax. Hear me out. You are sleeping on Jax as an ideal book boyfriend if you haven't picked up the series yet. When I tell you his character is the perfect mix of sarcastic, charming, infuriating, funny and protective, and her dynamic with Evangeline just represents such a nice balance of sweetness and devastation. At this point, I'm not sure I can find another book that can compare to the Eva Jax love story. Nothing will come close, I feel like. In the first book, we get the characters and the start of the plot established. In the second book, we dive deeper into some of the lore and the character motivations. And in the third book, it all comes to a peak with some unexpected twists and we get a satisfying ending. I would say my absolute favorite is actually the second book, also when it comes to the Eva Jax scenes, then the first book, and then the third book, to be honest. If you are interested, I have an entire reading vlog dedicated to reading the last book of the trilogy. I will link it above. This should come as no surprise that Divine Rivals from Rebecca Ross is also among the top 5 reads for me for 2023. As I mentioned, I live for romance stories that are sweet, bittersweet and devastating at the same time. Divine Rivals is set in a magical realism world where ancient gods have awakened and now they wage war against each other. We follow Iris and Roman, 2 young journalists who end up tangled up in the war. They are competing against each other by the day, snarky and bantering, but they exchange vulnerable letters by the night without fully knowing who they are writing to. They both grapple with their obligations towards their families, although these obligations are different, but they find understanding in each other through the shared letters. This setup alone already deserves 5 stars. It is closest to Rivals to Lovers, if you wish, but the war backdrop touches upon heavy topics such as grief and destruction, so even though it is labeled as a young adult historical fiction romance book, please check out the trigger warnings before picking it up. This story made me go through 5 emotions in like 5 pages. I was happy, then I was crying, and then laughing through my tears. It's been a while since a book made me feel this roller coaster of emotions in a good way, so it deserves a top spot for that alone. The second part, Ruthless Vows, was already published around the end of December, but I'm still waiting for it to be released in a physical form here in Austria. But believe me, it's basically number 1 on my reading list for January. After discovering Rebecca Ross through Divine Rivals, I jumped into her previously published work, and that's how I read A River Enchanted. This story again made my heart squeeze, but also depicted some beautiful family relationships that made me tear up while reading. A River Enchanted takes place on this magical island named Cadence, and we follow 4 characters and their unique struggles as youngers start disappearing from the eastern tribe believed to be abducted by the elemental spirits. Before going into it, I thought I wouldn't care about some characters, or I would have like second lead syndrome, or would only care about the romantic storyline, but I was pleasantly surprised that that wasn't the case at all. Each character is unique in terms of their motivations and backstory, but they share struggles centered around trust, belonging, duty, and their core beliefs being shaken, basically. Similarly to Divine Rivals, here as well the characters share understanding through their challenges, even though they approach them in very different ways. In my opinion, Rebecca Ross is the master of doing this with her characters, and I love it. Besides the characters, the book is worth reading for the lyrical descriptions alone. The author paints the island with very sound-focused, whimsical imagery as the wind whispers, and music also plays the role of calling out the spirits. And that makes the reading experience super immersive. If you enjoy a compelling world building coupled with the exploration of not only the main romantic relationship, but also familial connections such as brother and sister, cousins, father and daughter, adoptive mother and daughter, in an emotional but also healing way, you should definitely add a River Enchanted to your TBR. Talking about lyrical descriptions, I realized I needed to have The Last Tale of the Flower Bride among my top 5 books in 2023. Hear me out, it's one of those books which I read, rated it 4.5 stars, not 5, but then as time passes, I still think about it. And if that's not the sign of a great book, I'm not sure what it is. Based on the stunning cover and the title, you might think, oh, this is another generic fae fantasy romance story, but you would be very wrong. It is set in modern times, and I would classify it as magical realism, but it's definitely one that makes you question what is real and what was in the character's imagination. We follow the tale of Indigo and her childhood best friend Azure through the eyes of Indigo's husband as he uncovers their secrets little by little. The main themes of obsession, manipulation, and delusions pair perfectly with the gothic background of the mystical House of Dreams, where Indigo lived, and Roshani Chokshi spins the story so vividly with her word choices. It is absolutely beautiful. It is a rather short story with below 300 pages, but definitely one that stands out among all the books I read in 2023 when it comes to its impact, and it makes me want to dive into more of the author's work as well, such as The Gilded Wolves, which you can see on my little TBR shelf behind me. Not gonna lie, I struggled a little bit to choose the 5th book on this list, but I went with a similar sentiment like for The Last Tale of the Flower Bride, asking myself, what was a book that stood out to me among the 50 I went through? And after the 4 I already talked about, the 5th has to be One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. I enjoyed this book thoroughly and flew through it in like 2 weeks, which is a fast read for me. In this story we have a unique magic system with the Providence cards granting special abilities to the people who come in contact with them, but they also pay a price for the magic. Our main character, Elspeth, touched a nightmare card as a child, and now she has an ancient spirit trapped inside her head called the Nightmare, and she has a hard time keeping it under control. The lore around the Providence cards was spot on to fit the gothic fantasy genre, and I mentioned already in my autumn reading wrap-up how much I love the fact that the Nightmare talked and gave foreshadowing in rhymes. It elevated the whole reading experience for me and made it more memorable. This book has the perfect gothic autumn vibes with eerie, misty castles and forests, mysterious love interest who is clever and capable, and a little bit of scheming against the throne plotline to keep things interesting. There are no revolutionary plot twists or character motivations that I've never seen before, but I have to say Rachel Gillig crafted a fantasy story with just the right amount of mystery, gothic vibes, unique magic, sweet romance, and good plot pacing that is exactly to my taste. Therefore, it deserves a spot among my top 5. And with that, we reach the end of this list, so I will stop rambling because, believe me, I could go on and on about all the reasons why I rated these books so highly. I hope I could convince you to add them to your TBR or pick them up if you already have them. Let me know in the comments below what were your outstanding reads in 2023, so I can also add to my own never-ending TBR. Thank you in advance. So see you in my next video. Until then, take care, bye!